Salutations. What a past day and a half it has been. Indeed, a monumental historical event of rare importance has occurred. Almost seemingly, although expected, but without much notice, Queen Elizabeth II, after 70 years of reigning as the Queen of the United Kingdom, I will omit Northern Ireland because Northern Ireland is part of Ireland. Deal with it, Tories. She's died. Finally, the end of the Second Elizabethan era has come, but the error of monarchy continues to persist, especially here in the free and independent Republic of the United States. Where was I when I got the news? I was in Quick Check having a coffee, and as soon as the bulletin came across my phone, I got up and started dancing. That's right, I started dancing in the middle of Quick Check, playing God Save Ireland and Ding Dong the Witch is Dead, and spent the whole day blasting Irish rebel music from my car stereo. For me, such was a momentous occasion of cathartic jubilance, of which I can only compare to such when the New York Giants defeated the undefeated New England Patriots in the 2008 Super Bowl, and a day of which I will never forget, but for good reasons. Personally, having been harassed by the American security state a few years ago, inquiring as to why I was raising sensitive questions about the British royal family on Twitter, going insofar to interrogate my family and their neighbors, to paraphrase one of my philosophical influences, a hero of the working class, and one of the leaders of the Irish Republican movement, James Connolly. We also hastened thither in order to offer to King Edward, or in this case, Queen Elizabeth II, and the new monarch, King Charles III, in the name of ourselves and of our class, the only homage we owe them is our hatred. With the utmost amount of sincerity, I say, good riddance, good riddance, good riddance. Unfortunately, the rest of the mainstream American society and, dare I say, our treasonous political establishment does not seem to share my sentiments. Since the moment that the passing of Queen Elizabeth II was announced, there has been nothing but endless groveling, endless positive spin from mainstream news networks. CBS News went so far to declare Queen Elizabeth II as the Queen of the world. What? And endless gestures of performative adoration and praise for one of the biggest monsters the 20th century and the early 21st century has had the misfortune of knowing, citing ad nauseum, the so-called special relationship between the United States of America and the United Kingdom. Our president in name only, Joe Biden, went so far to order all American flags to be flown at half-staff in honor of the Queen of the nation that of which the United States declared its independence from in 1776. Some may question, how can I have such vitriol for Queen Elizabeth II, who is just a sweet old grandmother type whose role is only that of a ceremonial figurehead? How can I stoop so low to speak so ill of the dead so soon, so sudden? Other than personal reasons, for which I stated earlier, there are a plethora of other reasons for which I will bring up as to why the Queen should not be mourned and why the institution of monarchy should be abolished outright. First thing is first, let's examine the history of Queen Elizabeth I to understand how Queen Elizabeth II operated. Queen Elizabeth I, who was the Queen of England between 1558 and 1601, known as the Virgin Queen, producing no heir, seldom declared open acts of warfare on her enemies. She would act indirectly through soft power. She would plant spies in foreign governments as a means to sabotage and destabilize them. She would hire British mercenary Francis Drake to go incognito as a pirate and sink merchant vessels to ruin the economy of Spain. She would also have spectacles staged as random acts of terror as a means to get her foreign continental rivals to break out in open warfare against each other. Early in her reign in 1567, Queen Elizabeth I would have her cousin, the Catholic Queen of Scotland, Mary, deposed and eventually beheaded because a Catholic magistrate, other than the Pope, is such an intolerable occurrence if you are the head of the Anglican Church, deemed as the defender of the faith. You don't want those pesky Catholic leaders using their false religion to spread their false, to make false converts of everywhere else. We can't have that, no. Queen Elizabeth II, in the past 70 years of her reign, operated similarly to Queen Elizabeth I. Always in the background, always unassuming, seemingly above the fray and stoic, and as a symbolic figurehead, as chaos ensued everywhere else. As I cited in a previous fireside chat, the Crown, which was once the largest military empire in the world, has had this historical tendency to hold grudges. They have been fighting to keep their iron grip on Ireland for the past 900 years. They've been at war with France, Germany, and Spain for multiple hundreds of years. They colonized Italy and still retain their financial influence there today. They have stubbornly been fighting to retain their influence in Southeast Asia and in Hong Kong and Taiwan, after 200 years of humiliating China. Why not? Of course. And for the past 1,000 years, as far back as when the Normans, led by William the Conqueror, seized the English Isles to establish the present monarchy, the Crown has made multiple encroachments upon the Middle East, particularly Palestine, and were quite salty when King Richard I lost Jerusalem in the Third Crusade in 1187, only to regain possession of the region after the First World War in 1918, promising Palestine to both Arabs and European Jewish seeking the establishment of a Jewish homeland, and creating the ongoing conflict that plagues the region today, which continues to conveniently justify Western European and American military presence in the region today as a means to have easy access to the region's petroleum reserves. In August 1947, after 200 years of having a stranglehold on India, killing untold millions and exploiting collectively 1 billion souls, the British would leave India, but they seem to have forgotten to take their financial institutions with them, and still continue to profit despite the fact that India had struggled for its political independence for all that time. Do not think for a second that the Crown internally hasn't quite gotten over the fact that losing the United States in 1783 was quite an embarrassment for them, and they've been scheming to get their former rebellious colonies back in line ever since then. To cite James Connolly again, in the name of a superior civilization, the British Empire crushed the development of native genius, and in the name of superior capitalist development, it destroyed the native industries of a sixth of the human race. While neoconservatives and dim-witted libertarians who keep listening to them constantly bring up this tired old Margaret Thatcher talking point relative to the overinflated death toll of communist regimes killing over 100 million people, and how the globalist free market system has lifted so many people around the world out of poverty, they seem to gloss over the fact that well over 1 billion souls have died and were exploited under the tyranny of the Crown. And this body count can also be affixed to the 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II, like Queen Elizabeth I, through indirect soft power. Early in Queen Elizabeth's reign in 1956, when Gamal Nasser nationalized the internationally owned, more like British-owned, Suez Canal in Egypt, the French and British military would invade Egypt as a means to take back control of the Suez Canal. As Western European forces were struggling against the Egyptian military backed by the Soviets, the British would ask the Eisenhower administration for additional military support. Avoiding a potential Third World War, President Eisenhower would tell the Queen, no. After the 1953 joint CIA-MI6 coup on Iran's socialist president Mohammad Mossadegh, done at the behest of Winston Churchill and British Petroleum, and going over Ike's head only 8 months into his first term, Ike wasn't going to play along this time. On an official level, this would mark the end of what was the British Empire, or did it? Under the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, the British Empire would dramatically downsize its physical military presence across the planet, seemingly withdrawing from most of its colonial outposts, but like with India and Palestine, retaining their financial institutions and their former outposts so long as they retained the free market system. What more, the Crown and the City of London would go to great lengths to establish a vast network of offshore banks in their semi-independent colonial outposts, particularly in the Caribbean, like Grand Cayman, which is home to more corporations than people, by the way, which they would dub as secrecy jurisdictions, and which would exist as offshore tax havens interlinked with the Vatican Bank and Swiss banks, and for nominal fees provide a safe haven for the financial elite to offshore unpaid tax dollars and charitable income to be under the protection of the monarch, who is above the law, who cannot be arrested, prosecuted, investigated, or sued, and the Crown. Today, these offshore tax havens withhold between $50 trillion to $100 trillion worth of capital. The British Empire isn't dead. It evolved. And this evolution would not have occurred if there was no Queen Elizabeth to give the go-ahead. As communism was a threat to the globalist free market system created by the British Empire, with the City of London at the center of it, the Crown would yield to the military superiority of the United States. And it would be the United States that would become the sole military superpower, and it would be American tax-paying citizens under an anti-communist spell who would waste trillions upon trillions of dollars, not investing in themselves. No, that's socialism. We can't have social safety nets or publicly owned institutions. That's socialism. But instead of invested in containing communism to protect the global free market system. Of course, this would happen only after a pesky Irish Catholic president was taken out of the picture for not entirely going along with the program, and then much later on, after communism was supposedly defeated, the United States would waste another $12 trillion on military endeavors to defeat radical Islam and bring democracy to the Middle East after a conveniently timed terrorist attack on September 11, 2001, early in George W. Bush's first term. Terrorist attack which my uncle died in, by the way, as a means to help OPEC, Halliburton, and British Petroleum further consolidate their resource monopoly over the region's petroleum. But they couldn't get Iran because China and Russia got in the way, which means the Cold War is on again. But it might be a hot war this time. And now look, the United States, after spending some 6 decades worth wasting countless trillions of dollars on these endeavors, politically is the most polarized it has been since the American Civil War. Materialistically speaking, life is not good for the average working American citizen, regardless if they're liberal or conservative. There's mass shootings, mass drug addiction, public infrastructure is crumbling, people on the left are gaslit with extreme liberal revisionist propaganda aimed at destroying white supremacy and wishing to destroy the white supremacist history of the United States and integrate it into a global community. And then there's the morons on the right who are gaslit with extreme conservative revisionist propaganda aimed at communism like this is still the 1950s into wishing to destroy this country and turn it into a Christian theocracy. Either way, the country is poised to rip itself in half and potentially become merged into an economic union with Canada, potentially by the end of the decade. Point blank. Queen Elizabeth II used the playbook that Queen Elizabeth I used on her European rivals in the 14th and early 15th century, but on the United States. Queen Elizabeth II does not deserve any praise. She deserves no adoration. The Empire State Building should not be lit up in purple for her. The American flag should not be flying at half staff for her. Americans should not be crying over her. Instead, they should be crying over the past 6 decades worth of systemic dismantling of our public institutions, our infrastructure, and the backward and decadent state this country is in due to its special relationship with the United Kingdom, which echoes the special relationship of the kind between a deer tick and a dog. All thanks to Queen Elizabeth II. Her son, King Charles III, who should be referred to as Lord Dracula due to his matriarchal lineage linked to Vlad III of Wallachia, who coined the term, that's Vlad the Impaler, by the way, who coined the terms Build Back Better and Great Reset, is well known for his designs on working through the United Nations to create a more environmental, sustainable, inclusive international community. Should not be met with any praise. He should be met with endless resistance. He is not the king of the world. He is not the king of the United States. Hell, he's barely the king in his own country. In closing, to quote another philosophical influence of mine, a man who should be rightfully considered as the father of the American Revolution, Thomas Paine, the king is not to be trusted without being looked after, or in other words, that a thirst for absolute power is the natural disease of monarchy. The monarchy is not merely some ceremonial position kept in place for the sake of generating tourism revenue in London. It's a position with no transparency, which from behind the scenes wields unlimited power, unlimited influence, and is beyond legal inquiries domestically and internationally. Republicans in Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and in England proper would do well to brace themselves for the fight of their lives against Lord Dracula, the final boss of global imperialism. Americans need to stop pointing their fingers at Russia and at China and at each other. They need to stop pointing their fingers at each other. They need to remember their own history and point their fingers at their original antagonist, who has posed as a disingenuous and parasitical ally since the Second World War, and which poses the greatest threat to destroy the experiment of the American Revolution. Down with the crown. Goddamn Queen Elizabeth II, goddamn King Charles III, and God save our American state. This is Comrade Pella, signing out.